Do you actually need property or parenting orders officially done? Today's episode, we're going to cover the basics on this and talk about the 10 things people think. And I'm going to put these things to Mum and she's going to give her opinion. And it is going to hopefully help those weighing up whether they bother to get property or parenting orders. So welcome, Mum.
Hello, Laura. Welcome, everybody.
Now, just a reminder to everyone that this is just general education. We are not providing legal advice. Mum is not providing legal advice. This is just her opinion and her thoughts on the matter. And we strongly suggest everybody goes and gets independent legal advice from a lawyer about their own individual circumstances.
Yeah, this is just some things to think about.
The reason we did this episode is because a lot of these questions that I'm going to put to Mum, I get asked on social media or by email all the time. And we thought, okay, let's just address them on a podcast.
Hello, I'm Laura Furiosi, divorced mother of 3, and I'm here with my mother, Lynette Galvin, with 35 years experience in family law. You're listening to the Divorce Course podcast. Through our candid discussions, we hope to help you through your divorce or de facto separation. We will be answering the most commonly asked questions and covering the stages and steps that you will face on your way to freedom.
All right, Mum. So there are these things called property orders and parenting orders. And there are a lot of people who think, well, what? We'll ask, do I actually need to get them? Is it actually a thing? And we're going to go through these 10 common things that are asked, and I'd love to get your opinion on them. But can we just quickly just talk about what is a parenting order and what is a property order so that people know what we're actually talking about?
Good question, Laura. I think that parenting orders, of course, are how you parent your children. So anything in relation to children, and orders are the things that are made by the court, either after a trial or by consent about kids. Okay. And then property orders is about all your stuff. Okay. You don't have to have a house and a mortgage and stuff to be looking at a property order. It might just be your things, but it does include super. And that's something that a court will make in order to make by consent or after a trial.
So just to confirm, what does consent mean? So obviously the judge one is done by a judge sitting there and hitting his gavel with his little wig or her wig. But what does consent mean, the other way to get an order?
So we all know what the trial is like, and then the judge hands it down, literally tells you what it is. The consent orders are started pretty well the same way with an application to the court. But instead of putting you on that conveyor belt we talk about to a trial, it goes, please will you make orders about our property, or please will you make orders about our children? And here are the orders we want. And both of you have signed it, so that you're still invoking the court's jurisdiction, but you're saying, by the way, but we want you to make these orders for us. And
we've both agreed.
And we've both agreed. Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. So some people have written into us and said, well, do I really need parenting orders and property orders? And the main one we get is we've agreed on everything already. We don't need formal orders. So if you've got an amicable partner and you've sat down, or maybe not amicable, who knows, but you've agreed and you know exactly what's happening with the kids and you know what you're going to do with all your property. Yep. What do you say to those people go, well, we've already agreed, we don't actually need orders?
Yes. So with the children's orders, with children's matters, the court has another way that you can make arrangements for the kids. It's not enforceable. You can't go to court if someone breaches them, but that's a parenting plan. And if you know you're amicable, you know you're not the sort of people to have, a big fight later on about it, then a parenting plan is good enough. It never goes to court. It is a document that you write up yourself. Most of them are handwritten or typed and signed, and that's your parenting plan. If you're amicable, but you want to sort of make sure it's secure, your parenting arrangements, then you do need a consent order with your orders attached. The reason I think you should do something like that is that things change. And most often, anecdotally, I can tell you, people come into me over the years and say, everything was fine until she repartnered or he repartnered or I repartnered. And then people are become tricky. So we always say, don't we, Laura, get in quick. And while everything is still amicable, in case it doesn't last. So There's a cynical point of view.
So basically you're saying parenting plans aren't enforceable.
No, they're not.
And so if you do have a parenting plan, and you can go and listen to one of our episodes, I'll put it in the show notes of how to do a parenting plan or what you can, things you need to think about. But if you have that and then they all of a sudden change their minds, then it can all go back to crazy. And you can end up in court anyway. Is that right?
Yes, because parenting plans don't end the court proceedings or any
right. But if you get parenting orders by agreement, consent put through, or by a judge, then that puts a line in the sand and then it's done.
It does. You can overturn them or get them varied, but in very particular circumstances. And there has to be something massively major happens, because the court's view is that it's best for the kids to not be dragged through court cases. You might think it's just you and your ex, but they're getting interviewed in that. So they say one and done really with children, unless there's a big change. They always have to keep in mind the children's best interests. And that's why they can't stop it and say, well, you can never come back. They can do that with property.
What about property? Yeah. So they've said, we've already agreed on everything. We don't need formal orders. He gets that car, I get this car. We're splitting the money and we're going on our way. What do you say to that, to those people?
I say you need to put a red line under your financial arrangement with your ex. And the case that makes me say that is now 25 years old, and it's the case of Farmer and Bramley. Now, they were married for a long time, had a child, separated, and the man was a drug addict through the whole relationship. And then they separated, hadn't got divorced, and he won $5 million in the lottery.
Wouldn't it be nice?
Wouldn't it be nice? Well, he thought he was doing really well. But her lawyer was brave enough to say, hang on a minute, she should have a share of that. And his lawyers, when he got them, said no, because she didn't contribute to it. I bought it post-separation. But the court and the full court approved it and said the contributions don't have to be happening at the time that you come into this money. So it might be lottery win, it might be inheritance. But unless you've got your orders finalised with property, it's always sort of open for at least a year after divorce. And some people don't get divorced for years, or within 2 years of separation for de facto. So it's need to underline it. Yeah.
So it is risky, is what you're saying.
And some people do. They go, look, you know what, I'll just ride it out and wait. Because at some point the court has to say to people, no, you can't come back to court for property, or no, you're out of time. We don't have the jurisdiction to do your property case. So, those are automatic barriers the court puts up. So with kids, they go, look, we can't ever say one and done with kids, but we can say one and done with property. And if you don't have your one and done, when the property pool is as you left the relationship, if the other side does apply, it's the property that you've got at the time of the hearing, not what you had when you separated. So you may have I see people, they divide the money up half and go, that's it, 50-50. One person wastes it. The other person buys a house and it increases in value. And then the other person goes, can I have my property settlement, please? And the court has to look at all of the assets, including if someone's gone and bought a house and done well with their money. So Woodland and Todd is the case that says it's at that time, and it's the super as well. But there's a new law coming through that is going to have a look at the wastage that person might have done with their money. And there's a chance then they'll get it sheeted back to them. But,
So Mum's saying to those people who say, but we've already agreed and we just don't need formal orders, Mum's saying it's risky.
It is.
Okay, objection 2 that we've heard a lot of is it's too expensive and too time consuming to get orders. And look, I hear you. I hear you. And if you've got a high conflict or a manipulative controlling, of course it's going to be time consuming and it's going to be expensive if you're not smart about it. So Mum, what do you say about that issue that people have as to why they don't do it?
Yes. I know it's hard. And you probably that relieved that you're out, that you don't want to be thinking about it anymore. I think people are very like it's an emotional toll. Even if you wanted the separation, it still hits you pretty hard. But it's not that hard. I mean, if you've got an amicable person, then go and see a lawyer and talk about your proposals or find out that that's a reasonable split. And then do your own consent orders up. We take you step by step through those and how to draw up your orders. So do it yourself. It is a little bit tricky, but not that hard.
So I like to think of it as there is a cost involved. Like do people think, oh, I'm going to do it. We're not doing anything because it's too costly. The cost is that later you may end up paying heaps of legal fees just to fight it again. Like Mum said in the Farmer and Bramley cases or the Woodland and Todd cases. So there are, plenty of examples of where they've done that and then later on it's come to bite them in the bum. And, to look at it as maybe as an investment into, your peace of mind and knowing that you're future-proofing your long-term protection financially.
Yeah, because it's like a business. I know there's a lot of emotion, but if you had a business partner and you were going to divide assets between you both, wouldn't you put that in writing? And I worry, Laura, that a lot of people who don't go to a lawyer and don't finalise it are being misled by someone saying, let's not get the lawyers involved. Let's just be amicable. And, and they are being sort of taken advantage of.
So another way to avoid it being too expensive is, like Mum was talking about, you don't have to rely on the judge to make the decision. You can do it at mediation. You can go to mediation to sort it out, which is a lot cheaper than court. And like Mum said, consent orders. You can do consent orders and you can, as long as you've seen a lawyer to know where you stand and make sure you're doing it right, you can do your consent orders yourself. That the family court has set up a system for self-represented people to file their documents for consent orders and you're one and done. So yes, it can be costly and expensive, but there are multitude of ways. Many of our listeners and our members and the people who've done our course do it easily at a fraction of the cost.
I like what you said about insurance, because that's exactly what it is. And it's peace of mind if you finish it off and then you know that someone can't pay back. Because people, whilst it's a 2-year limit for de facto separation, if you don't do it in that time, then you will have difficulty with the court and go and see a lawyer, for goodness sakes. There's lots of circumstances around that. But with a divorce, the time starts where the day your divorce becomes final. But people don't get divorced for years sometimes, years and years. And in that time, everything's changed. And then it has to be, and taken into account. But you don't have to be divorced to do property settlement. I think that's a big question everyone asks.
That's true.
You don't have to have mediation to put in consent orders for property settlement if you do agree.
That's a good one. We did put that in.
No, it's good about it.
So yes, you can do all of that, still separated under one roof if you really can bring yourself to do it.
So one thing that I didn't mention is Section 90 of the Family Law Act says if any transfer is done pursuant to a court order, Section 90 of the Family Law Act says that the state can't charge you stamp duty. So it almost would pay for itself if you do your consent orders yourself and get that big benefit. If you're the one perhaps taking the house over, you don't pay any sales tax
a valid point. And that's the same with cars, swapping cars over in other people's names. You don't have to pay the stamp duty for that either.
Section 90 is brilliant because it says anything, any transfer of property. So
and stamp duty is insane. I was only looking at it the other day and I was like, what? That's crazy. So next one. We're amicable, so we don't need anything formal. And we've already kind of touched on this. We're basically saying amicable can sometimes go south. And we've got a great episode called When Amicable Goes Wrong. So Mum, should we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure.
So when it comes to amicable, we're amicable, so we don't need anything formal. I just want to remind everybody that sometimes it feels amicable, but what if it's not and you've just always agreed to everything? And you've just said yes because you're too afraid.
And also too, the way to find out if it's really amicable is to put it down in writing and get them committed to recording it as the truth. You may find that they are not actually amicable. They're just manipulative and controlling. And the very minute you ask them to sign a document or you say no to them about something, like they say, let's not get lawyers involved, and you say, look, yes, but I want the court to make an order to finalise. I want to be protected. Then you'll soon find out how amicable they are.
And if it is actually amicable, I've been co-parenting for a fair few years now, and I know plenty of people who are, and I have seen people co-parenting, something comes up, something unusual that's not happened before, and there's a disagreement over how it's going to happen or what's going to happen. They always can just fall back on what's written in the orders.
That's right.
And it stops the argument because the orders are the orders. So even if you are amicable, there may be things that happen in the future that you haven't thought about yet that are going to come up, and the orders are going to help you guys solve it without a huge fight. And also, the difference between a parenting plan and parenting orders is they kind of try to think of everything. Whereas I have seen parenting plans are just like, you can have Johnny on this day, you can have Johnny on this day. They don't really touch on everything. We've got a great episode you should go and listen to about parenting orders and parenting plans and what to put in them. So go listen to that.
And in our precedent orders, and most lawyers' precedent orders, I think, we always start off with that the children shall spend time with the mother and the father at all times that are agreed. So you couldn't, have extra time or less. But failing agreement, then you set everything out. And I think we've got 12 agreements, haven't we, Laura, in the children's orders and the course, because there's so many things you don't think of unless you're like me, I guess, doing it all day for 35 years. And things like special occasions, Christmas. What about if Monday is a pupil free day? What's going to happen if I'm sick? Who's going to be responsible for the child if the child gets sick middle of the day between two changeovers? So having it in writing just gives you that clarity. Yeah.
Well, and stability for the kids as well. I do hear, and we haven't talked about it in this one, but another objection that we do hear is, I don't want to get locked in formal orders because my kids are only little and things will be different when they're teenagers. What kind of answer do you have for that, Mum?
Yeah, absolutely, you're correct. But I don't know how the court is going to treat the children growing older as a way of being able to go back to court to get new orders. I think what they're saying is that is foreseeable. The kids are going to get older. So put it in your orders. And we talk about up until a certain age. So you might be comfortable up to year 2 or year 1 for some arrangement. Then you might want to change it for the middle school years. Then it might want to change for high school. But you can imagine those things going forward. So you're getting a fallback position for when they're bigger. And don't forget, if you put in your orders, like we say, at all such times as agreed between the parties, then it can be varied if you remain amicable. Yes. So it's
just a fallback.
It is, isn't it? Like having a belt on, even though your trousers aren't going to fall down.
Well, I've just seen people who they get a parenting plan and they're going along nicely, primary school, all the arguments are over because they've agreed on this plan. But then it gets to high school and then there's another blow up because who's going to do what, and then there's another fight. And then halfway through high school, something might happen and there's another blow up. So it just is a bit of a safety. And like Mum said, just because it's in the orders doesn't, if you both agree to change it slightly, you're allowed to. Like you're allowed to do whatever you like as long as you both agree on it.
Yep.
Now, the next issue that we hear a lot, which upsets me, and, if anyone feels triggered by this, please call 1-800-RESPECT, or you can go to Lifeline and have a chat with someone. But so many people message us and say, I don't want to escalate the conflict. I don't want my ex to get mad. So I don't want to ask for any orders. I don't want to ask for property settlement, or I don't want to ask for a parenting plan. So can you kind of talk us through that?
Primary thing is stay safe. And your instincts are probably spot on because you've been married before. So I understand you don't want to ask the question or do the thing with children or with property. But I think that in a situation where you're being pressured or bullied, or you don't say no because you're going to cop it, so to speak, verbally, I think that leaves the kids a little bit high and dry. And I fear you will end up having the same negotiation over and over again. And maybe because they're stronger and they've got you a little bit down, maybe they'll be taking more and more in relation to children than you are willing to give. So I think if you can, First of all, keep the kids safe. But then I think the best interests of the children is usually helped, I guess, by having a clear arrangement that's in writing. Everybody knows you can give it to the school. If it's even a parenting member, give an order to the school. Everyone knows where they stand.
Parents that I was talking about, that I had a parenting plan through primary school. Like I said, it was all fine. And this was, family violence related. There was a DV in place, and this person, really did struggle to negotiate with this other person. So that's why they never got a proper order. But then when it got to high school, then the argument and the abuse began again. And so whilst you may think that it's protecting you from conflict with your ex
by not having one,
by not having one, what it's actually doing is prolonging your conflict for as much as long as you've got children. So that is something to keep in the back of your head, that, you can get shuttle mediation. You can sit in completely different rooms. You don't have to see them. You can organize it through lawyers. You can get it sorted, and then it's done. And then if it's in an order, you don't ever have to talk to them again. It's just, this is how it is. But if you are too afraid to do that, Mum, what about with property?
Yeah, a lot of people do that with property. They don't ask for property, mainly because, in my experience, when they're talking about separation, there can be a person who says, that's it. You're not touching my super. This is all mine. You're not having anything. And, maybe even refuse to move out of the house. And so you can sort of take that on board a little bit, and you can feel a bit downtrodden. But actually, when the process starts, the court system, central practice direction, requires the other person to reveal what they've got, and your lawyer or you yourself will, in time, you'll get stronger and want your fair share. It's not, it's not a gift from someone else. It's your entitlement. If you're not entitled to much, then your lawyer will tell you, you can work it out in the course, and then you can settle for that amount. But it's almost never zero. It's almost never nothing. And I always say, if you're going to compromise or actually walk away from it, you need to know how much it is that you're compromising or walking away from. So please go and at least talk to someone. My experience is people forget to add in superannuation when they look at the property pool. And they also, there are sometimes expensive cars, vehicles, things like that matter. Yeah. So I think it's better to have it done and have that line drawn under.
So what you're saying is, Mum, for anybody who's worried about upsetting their ex and escalating conflict, is at least go and find out what you're giving up. Go and see a lawyer and find out what you're walking away from. And what I'm saying is, you may think you're avoiding conflict with your ex, but in the future, they, like you've said with property, they can come back. Like if they're a gambler or an alcoholic and they haven't done anything for ages, and they spend all the money and then come back and want more from you, have you drawn that line in the sand? You haven't if you haven't got a property order. So there's a lot to think about there, but go and see a lawyer and call 1-800-RESPECT if you're too afraid to do anything.
There's the red flag.
And of course, go and see the police if you feel unsafe, of course, but call 1-800-RESPECT and get some support there. Now, Mum, the other big one we get is, I don't want to go to court. And I don't think I've ever met anyone who's wanted to go to court.
I like going to court.
Okay, you're weird. But Mum, what do you say to those people who go, well, I don't want formal orders because I don't want to go to court?
Well, of course, consent orders, when I say you make an application to the court and you attach the document that you've both agreed on and signed as your orders, you don't have to actually physically go to court. You lodge those, and I think you do them on the portal, which is, electronically lodged. A registrar in their own back room called their chambers will have an in tray full of consent orders, and they'll go through them and see if they are just and equitable, which is what the court has to decide. They're not to make any orders unless it's fair. And even though they're consent orders, you two can't make the orders. You have to ask the court to make the orders. And this judicial officer, registrar, they're the ones who either stamp it and go, yes, that's sensible, or they say, oh, I don't know if that's really fair, and they'll send a letter out to you. I mean, if you get your consent orders a little bit wrong and the court rejects them, it's no big deal. They write you a letter and say, can you tell me about this, this, and this? and then you put that in, and then you'll get your orders through. So it's quite dignified not having to go to court.
So you don't have to step into a courtroom. There's no going to court. It's just emailing them and them emailing you back, basically.
And so a BFA or financial agreement for property, you don't have to go to court with either at all. But that's really a complex way of resolving property settlement, usually done where, this is just my view, I see people recommending financial agreements when it's not fair. And the person who knows it's not fair does not want that registrar with the in-tray looking at the orders and going, that's not fair. So they do these financial agreements that never go to court, but they're just as binding as long as they're done properly. So parenting plans never go to court. The thing with children's matters, Laura, is the same thing with consent orders. You've got that registrar looking at those orders. And if there's been an allegation of violence or family violence in that notice of risk that you have to file, then they will look at the orders to make sure they look after the kids properly. And then, if not, they'll ask you to address them, but you still don't go to court.
Yeah. And I'm just going to be devil's advocate here to those people who are petrified of going to court. If you don't lock in formal orders, you're more likely to end up in court in a way if your ex, like we've said, down the line remarries and wants to, see the kids more often, or down the line spends all their money and wants a property settlement 5 years from now. You're the one who's going to have to go to court to fight it.
Yes.
So it's kind of a protection of you going to court.
That's right.
To get an agreement. Yeah.
And even if you win, it has cost you emotionally and financially. It's quite stressful. I know some people have come to me and they haven't had any orders, and they're kind of, fingers crossed, hope nothing flares up. But they do spend their time either making sure their income's too low to have to pay child support, or making sure everything's in their new partner's name so they don't have any assets. And what a way to live your life going forward.
Yeah.
Constantly worried that someone's going to rise up and ask for some of your property or want to change the arrangements. So it's a kind of a gift to your future self,
Yeah.
And my dream with people is with consent orders, with children particularly, right? You refer to them quite a lot. It tells you what time to pick them up. We talk about in our orders where you collect from school, what do you do if school's closed, all of these things. It's like a little manual for what you do. But my hope is that after a while, it becomes second nature. You are amicable enough, things are rolling on, that it's put somewhere in a file, but you don't have to look at it all the time, It's just with those wobbly first few years.
It's like when you go to school yourself or you start a new job and there's rules and guidelines that you have to follow. And after 5 years of going to high school, you know exactly what uniform to wear and what day you've got to wear it. And it's just, but when you're in grade 7 and you start high school, you're freaking out and you've got to read the rules all the time. So kind of like you said, Mum, it just becomes second nature and it rolls along. What about those people that say, I don't really own any property, so it's not worth it?
You're invited to our free webinar. Whether you're stuck at the beginning of deciding to divorce or you're struggling to find your way through the legal jargon and fear of the unknown of the legal process, we are here to empower you to take control. Join us to learn what steps you can take, followed by a live Q&A where you get Lynn, my amazing mum, and family law accredited specialist to answer your questions. All you have to do is go to www.thedivorcecourse.com.au and click on Reserve My Seat. We'll see you there. Hurry, spaces are limited, so don't miss out. Register today.
What about those people that say, I don't really own any property, so it's not worth it?
Farmer and Bramley, they owned nothing. They didn't have it. That's why they didn't have a property settlement. They had nothing. And yes, and then if there's money comes to you later on by inheritance or by lotto winnings, then, you don't want to have to share that.
So there's consent orders, isn't there, that say basically everyone keeps whatever they've got?
Yes. Yeah, that's right. Everyone keeps whatever they've got. And it's like a metaphorical red line under the finances of your relationship, and you've got clear air after that. You can win the lotto, buy a house, whatever you like, but the other person, the court does really only give every relationship one go at property orders. And they very, very rarely will reopen a property order case.
So if you don't own much property and it's not really feeling like it's worth it, you could do your own consent
Yep.
orders and just say everybody keeps whatever they've got, sign here, put it in court, done.
I think we've
And
got
then
that clause in it, haven't we? Yeah.
we've got that in the course.
Yeah.
Okay, what about we trust each other, so we'll stick to our agreement?
Yes. Call me cynical, but it may be that I only see people for whom that didn't pan out. Maybe there are people who go, we trust each other, but in property matters, what about that Section 90 exemption for stamp duty? There are strategic reasons. And the other reason is that with property is to draw that red line so you can move forward confident. And with the kids, I understand that you may be amicable, but you are probably negotiating everything every day. Do you want to pick the kids up tomorrow, or can you do this? And it kind of is a bit all encompassing. So I like to have it all written down. And then when there's a change, it's an exception to the general orders rather than negotiating each week.
Seen as time has moved on, like we've said, people get new partners with children's matters, particularly where they're like, well, why aren't you seeing little Johnny more often? And then they kind of push to see little Johnny more often, but which they've never shown any interest in the past. With property, I've seen like grandparents get involved and going, well, you should have obviously got more, so why go and get some more? Like, why don't you go and so there is outside factors. Even if you are trusting each other, there are other people that are going to come into your ex's life and your life that may change your minds about things.
Well, also, if you don't do anything about property, for instance, you will never know for sure if you've got a good deal or if it was a good arrangement, because there's none of this. I'll show you my bank statements and superannuation. You show me your bank statements so that everyone's clear on what the assets are. Kind of a bit of a blind lucky dip, isn't it? And I wonder how many times people who've done it amicably, then they're out of time, so they don't have any orders, but they've lost the court window. They wake up and go, how come that person's just bought a new boat or a holiday home? And did I get my fair share? What did I miss?
Yeah.
What did I miss?
You don't want that running around the back of your head for the rest of your life. So so if you are doing consent orders, you do still need to say, okay, well, here's my information, here's your information, and we show you how to do that in the course.
Yep.
Another thing people say, Mum, and I totally get this, like you think about it, you're separated, you're dealing with maybe moving, you're dealing with the stress of becoming a single parent, just the whole lot is just nightmare fuel. And they say, it's just too overwhelming right now. I'm going to deal with it later. Is there any issues in delaying getting formal orders for things?
I think you've got to allow yourself a bit of grace when you're going through all of that, but be careful that you haven't missed an opportunity. So that, for instance, open houses are absolute bane of every separated person's life. It's bad enough if you're not trying to navigate a breakdown of a relationship. And in those open houses, I get it. Been there, I've got it. Throw the laundry in the car and take the dogs for a drive while you have your open house and all of that. But in the heat of all of that and in the stress of all of that, what are you going to do with the proceeds? What are you going to do with the cash that goes into your real estate agent's bank or into your joint account? How's that going to be divvied up? And if you don't know, and perhaps everyone just both of you take 50-50, how do you know that's fair if you haven't gone and had a look? And you might need to say, look, no, we can each have maybe a little bit of money, but I want to leave the rest there so there's enough to settle my property settlement because, they might be other assets and super. So it's hard to focus on those things, I know, but you're doing yourself a little bit of a favour.
Have you ever seen where someone sold the house, they've split the money, and then they've used that money to buy a new house, and then someone's come for property settlement and they've had to sell their new house?
Yeah.
Ooh. Okay. Mum, you haven't touched on it yet, but I'm going to touch on it here. That in delaying, and we've got a great episode on divorce limbo and all the risks that are involved with it, but other issues can come up. So we've heard of things of where their ex has just gone belly up with their business. Then they've all of a sudden got massive tax debts. They haven't been doing their job anymore. They've just completely gone off the rails. but they separated and they did their split, but they didn't do it officially. And then they've ended up with paying half of their tax debt.
Yep.
So you see that happen?
I do see that happen. And
Yeah.
the courts is beginning to say a post-separation tax debt that arose after you've separated, that belongs to the person who was running the business, whatever. But to the extent that the tax debt was during the relationship, say, for instance, you hadn't been paying your proper amount of tax and it gets reassessed or whatever it is, the court says that is joint debt because you had the benefit of the money and so did the business owner have the benefit of the money. I've never seen a business suddenly flourish after a separation. I mean that. It might be because the person in the business is feeling low and unmotivated, or it might be that they've deliberately sunk the business or just said, well, what's the point of me going on if I'm just going to give it to you? And they make these bad decisions post-separation. Very hard to prove. And one of the best things you can do is at least get to mediation, get some disclosure and try to lock in the property before they let it go down the go-go. And I think, but you can't prove it, but I think sometimes an early property settlement that leaves the person with their business is better for everyone because that person then has an added motivation. You know, if you're in business, you can't sort of be, half-hearted about it. You got to use your whole heart. And so a nice early settlement helps everyone see. I think sometimes the avoidant person, Laura, is just scared of what might happen. And that needs to be faced. And I'm saying that for our listeners as well. If you're the avoidant person for the moment, you are probably just scared. So if you pick up the phone and ring some lawyer and go in for a reduced fee appointment just to know where you stand, that's important. And you can take the rest from there.
Action is the antidote to fear. So doing something, even just listening to this as a start, seeing a lawyer, do something, go and listen to another episode. We've got an episode called Weapons of Tax Destruction.
Yes.
With Pedro, who's a
Joe
financial.
Barron. Yep.
And we found that there are a lot of people who are in these situations where they're the secretary or the chairperson, but have never had anything to do with it.
They do the books. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a trust or some sort of business structure they're involved in, and they just kind of stick their head in the sand because they can't imagine how to get out of it. And Pedro does talk a little bit about that and how that can get you into a lot of trouble. So go and listen to that episode.
And also when I see somebody, and when I used to see somebody and in our courts, the number of times you do a search, you can do it through Cytec Confirm. You do a search on a person's name and they go, I'm not in it. And it turns out they're a director or a secretary or an owner of a business. And if you trust the other person, you're just signing. And then you find out you've got these potential liabilities. Like they're thinking of jailing some directors in a case. Yes, where they were really basically asleep at the wheel of a business, but it was a big company. But you have obligations as a director, if that's what you are. And you may not even know until you search and find out that you are. And that is untangling.
That episode's a great one for you if you want to go and figure out how to do that and go and see a lawyer. Now, Mum, the other one that we always get, and sometimes it's them that say it, and sometimes most of the time it's their ex that says it, I don't want to involve lawyers.
Yeah.
I don't want to get a formal property settlement because lawyers will have to be involved. So let's just, number one, just push this away and say lawyers don't have to be involved in the whole thing.
That's right.
Okay. You just need to know where you stand and you need to get them to check your documents.
Yes.
Anything else you want to say there, Mum?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that lawyers are spending, 10, 20, 30 years learning this stuff. So you can't, although we try to teach people how to do stuff, we always say in the course, go and see one to find out where you stand. You don't have to enter a relationship with them. Find someone you can pay cash, sit there for an hour, find out stuff, go back, do your own consent orders, go back and see a different lawyer if you like, or that lawyer to have a look, and then you're done. But if you don't see a lawyer, and especially if the other person says, we don't want to get lawyers involved, if you don't see a lawyer, I'll bet you that you're the only one in that relationship that hasn't seen a lawyer, because the most often I hear, don't get the lawyers involved, is when they've got some advice about what your entitlement is and they don't like it. They don't want you to get that advice.
Flag.
Oh my gosh, yes. And it's right up there with don't touch my super.
We always say, go and see a lawyer, go and see a lawyer. You don't have to tell your ex that you've seen a lawyer.
No.
You can ask that lawyer just their opinion, give them all their details, listen to some of our other episodes, do our course where we show you what to take so you're not wasting that hour. Give it to them and say, what do you think? And then at least you know where you stand, you know what you're entitled to, and you've got it. You will feel, like I said, the action is the antidote to fear. You're going to feel less fearful because you know that you have got a backbone, you know what you're entitled to. And then it's up to you whether you decide to go for it or not. So, Mum, and then the last one is, I don't understand the process, so I'm just going to avoid it.
Yes.
That was me, 100%.
Yes.
I was just like, nope, I don't want to know. I'm not going to be able to solve this. I'm just going to stick my head in the sand, even though my mother's a lawyer. I'm just not going to do anything.
Yeah.
Is that a good reason not to get formal orders?
No. I mean, like I said, you have to give yourself a little bit of grace, because that is a big problem area. You're going through so much, but doing nothing is probably not an option. With children, it's better for them to have something, so that you've got it ruled off, and try to think of it like a business arrangement. And if you're going to a lawyer, it's none of your ex's business. It's hard when you've been in a marriage and everything's sort of probably dictated by the person who's told you don't get lawyers involved. But you're a grown person. Go and get your confidential legal advice. Pay for it on the spot. Don't enter a relationship with someone and if you don't want to, and let it run out of money, because the statistics are that so many more people end up at a final trial self-represented than the ones who start at the beginning. Because if you do engage a lawyer for some of those early stages, they can use up all your money before you even get to the cross-examination part, the big part of the trial.
That's right. I ended up having to self-rep a bit because, I did. I spent a lot of money in the early days. And I think a lot of people do that because they don't know what the process is.
That's right.
If I'd known, this is what you've got to do for disclosure, I would have gone, you know what, I'll do that. That's going to save me that much money. I'll do that. So once you know what the steps are to take, once you know what happens next, you might not fully understand it, but once you know what the process is and the steps are, particularly with consent orders, it's actually way less scary than it actually seems.
Yes.
And it's a lot easier. And so many people do it themselves. So I think you can rely on legal aid, community legal service. You can listen to our podcast.
Yes.
You can do our course where we walk you step by step through all the stages. You can, go and see a lawyer once, give them cash and just be like, lay it on me. We've done an episode where we take you through the whole conveyor belt from start to finish. But ideally, if you can stay out of court, if you can get your agreement done and you can create consent orders and you can file it yourself, then you've got the benefits of having formal orders. So, Mum, I'm just going to touch on basically what you've talked about is people need formal orders for financial security, for your children's stability, for legal protection, and for clarity. I think that sums it up, right?
I couldn't have said that better myself. Yes.
So I think while all of these objections, and I've heard them and I've said them, particularly I don't want to go to court, it's funny that they're basically the flip. Like, I don't want to go to court, so I won't do formal orders. But then these people who end up being the ones that go to court, or I'm trying to save money, so I don't want to get formal orders. And then the ex comes back and they end up having to spend all this money to fight them. So it's kind of like this weird what do you call it?
Oxymoron. Yes.
Oxymoron.
Yes.
So, and I think, like we said, there are so many risks involved. So you need to make sure, what Mum has said is, make sure you know what you are walking away from if you're not going to do this. At least do that for yourself. Huh?
Yeah, I think so. And look, sometimes you walk away, even though you're entitled to some more money, And you do that because of your own peace of mind and the uncertainty of dragging it out and all of that. So no one's going to judge you for agreeing to something less than you're actually entitled to. Because when you take into account the delays, the expense, and the uncertainty, you may be prepared to lose some money for your peace of mind. And so don't feel bad if you're settling for something less. But as long as you know what you're giving up.
And I also want to say, don't feel bad if you are feeling like it's all too much, because I was there, Mum, you've been there.
Yeah.
And of course, in the early stages, the last thing you want to do is any of this.
Yep.
But you can do some things, like we've got a before you go checklist. If you're still in the super early stages, you could at least start gathering documents together. You don't even have to tell your ex you're doing that, to at least have that to the side so you're ready when you're ready. But don't let it go too long, because then that it gets messy.
Yes, it can. I think that sometimes we called it, I think, Laura, and we're hoping for the best, but planning for the worst. So when you're in a couple and you're managing and you're kind of muddling through, you may have an inkling that it's not going to work, but you're still hoping. It's probably time then to just start getting your ducks in a row. And a lot of people would come and see me, if I separate, what's the circumstance? What happens? So I feel for everyone in those early stages. I feel for everyone who thought it was all over and they haven't got it finalized. And now we're saying, you know what, mate, you've got to go and finish it, get it done. Yeah. You'll feel so much better when it's finished.
So obviously everybody's situation is different. We've just covered some main comments, emails that we've received over the years that always crop up. And I'm just like, I hope not many people are thinking these things, but I have a feeling they are, from the Facebook comments and the Instagram comments. So we wanted to try and broad brush approach, get the message out there on a megaphone. If you've got someone who's about to get separated or is going through a divorce and you're listening to this yourself, do them a favor and send them this as well. And I think all of us together, if we can educate each other and help each other out, the process can be a lot less horrid. Should we do a review? I feel like we haven't done a review in ever. Okay, if we do a quick. So this review, we've been a little bit lax with our reviews recently, guys. I'm so sorry, but we are going to be choosing a review once a month on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube to get a free call with Mum. So if this person is you, Noodles DL, and she or he wrote, I've been struggling with the mediation process, and this podcast is helping me get prepared with some invaluable information. I'm right now getting started on writing my document on coercive control that I can hand out to lawyers and mediators. So thank you. Big smiley face. So thank you, Noodles DL. Thank you for the review. I hope that your mediation goes well, and I'm sorry you had to write about coercive control. If anyone wants to listen to that episode, we've got a great episode on documenting coercive control. You can go listen to that. That's a free call to that person. So if you can email us at thedivorcecourspodcast@gmail.com, NoodlesDL, and we will organize. Right, cool. All right. And if anyone's interested also, we've got the webinar coming up.
That's right.
I'd like to register to come along and have a chat with Mum and me and learn a little bit more and educate yourself even more and take some more action to take more fear away. Register for the webinar. Go to thedivorcecourse.com.au and then go to register for the webinar. And we'll see you there.
Okay. Bye, Laura.
Thanks, Mum.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
If you found this podcast helpful, we'd love it if you could rate, review, and subscribe. By doing so, you are spreading the word to help someone else just like you. Lynn would like to remind you that this podcast is general advice only, and you should always get legal advice in relation to your particular situation. And remember that the Australian laws may have changed since recording,